Whether you're a first-time mom or a mom of many, there's always something new to learn. The how, when, and why of every new stage can be so overwhelming. So I'm here to share everything I'm learning along the way in my journey of parenthood. I don't have all the answers, and I probably never will. I'm just a mom, probably much like you, who simply wants to do the best I can to raise good, tiny humans. I believe there's joy to be found in every season of motherhood, and the more we know, the better we can help them grow. This is the Learning as They Grow podcast. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Learning as They Grow. I'm your host, Alicia Foster. So glad to have you back. 3 episodes now down, and I have so many things that I'm just so excited to talk to you about in this episode. We're going to be jumping into breastfeeding. I feel this is something that is just super crucial in being educated on. If you already have breastfed, you might be in the same mindset with me on this, it is not always something that just comes naturally for everyone. While it is the most natural thing, it's sometimes hard. If you're somebody who has not yet breastfed and you are interested in it, I think it's important to listen to this episode because you're going to be able to see that there are things that do need to be prepared for sometimes whenever you do want to breastfeed. And if you're somebody who breastfeeding was not for you, I still encourage you to stay tuned listening to this episode because I think it's awesome to be educated on both sides of different possible controversial issues. While breastfeeding shouldn't be controversial, it is sometimes in today's society. And I just would love to be able to shine some light on the pro breastfeeding side and being able to explain some things from my point of view and everything that I've learned in the last 14 months of breastfeeding my baby girl, Ellington. So if you are a mom who has already breastfed, if you are a mom who is about to have a baby and wants to know about breastfeeding, or if you're a mom who breastfeeding was not for you, or you think breastfeeding may not be for you, I still want you to stay tuned. Like, this is for everyone. This is not exclusive to just people who are into breastfeeding. I think this is going to be educational for people. This is going to be motivational if you're kind of on the fence, or if you had a hard first go around and you're kind of wanting to try again, but you're not really sure. And then I think it can be helpful for people who this may not be your vibe at all. You may not be into breastfeeding at all. And we can talk about reasons why that may be in this episode, but I think it's helpful to understand why people might choose that and kind of educate yourself on how different things work in the breastfeeding world. So wanted to get that out there, a little disclaimer. This is not exclusive to only breastfeeding, crunchy, natural, whatever people are calling it nowadays. This is for everyone. So stay tuned, keep listening. Let's jump in with, I think it's important to start with a very controversial topic here. And it's really sad to me, but let's talk about this. Okay, so the term breast is best versus fed is best. So I want to talk about this and help people understand on both sides where this has gone wrong. And I think the intention of both of these sayings. So I think it's important to say, if you're, I don't know if this is a new term for you, if you haven't heard breast is best or fed is best, then you might be like, wait, what is she talking about? But this is something that has been around for years. People say these statements or do hashtags of it. It's gone viral on TikTok, and it's become this big argument between moms, which is really sad. It shouldn't be. And the reason I think it's so sad is you have to stop and ask yourself, is what I'm debating and fighting for benefiting anyone? Because it's not benefiting the babies at all, because your baby might be breastfed, but if you're yelling at somebody, breast is best, their baby is likely not going to be breastfed because you're now turning the mom away from breastfeeding with your aggressiveness. So there's that. So you're not benefiting the babies. You're not benefiting the moms. That's huge, because we need to support each other. And in order to truly help people do better with certain things is education, and not yelling your point of view down their throat. That's just like never their way to go. I get some people just you can lead a horse to water and they're just never going to understand that that's not how you approach things. But for majority of people, I think they have good intentions when trying to share education and light on things, but they get heated and they get lost in their emotions. And that is when we lose people on the other side who are no longer going to listen to you. So let's stop with the anger in those statements of breast is best or fed is best. And let's understand where this whole term breast is best even came from. So breast is best actually came from the WHO, the World Health Organization. So this was not to say that feeding your baby is not necessity. This was to simply say breast is the optimal, the first primary chosen route that they encourage mothers to go. If you don't believe me, I'm going to pull up the article where I actually found this. So I'm sharing my screen right now. And if you're just listening, I'm going to read a quick tidbit from this. So this is from the National Library of Medicine, which is the government's library where they have articles for everything that has been, people have had theories and they've studied and they've come to conclusions for. So if you're ever interested in anything, this is a good place to go because people actually believe it and go, oh, wow, that the government does have that out there for us. Because I know sometimes with controversial issues, people say, where'd you read that? The internet. But if you're able to show, hey, this is actually coming from a source that you maybe trust, then it's right here. And some of the articles you do have to pay for, which is kind of frustrating, but it gives you the abstract. So that's what we're looking at. This was an article in 2005, and it says breast is best for babies. So I just want to read this very beginning line. It says breastfeeding is the optimal method of infant feeding. That was the conclusion they came to. So that is where this breast is best came from. It wasn't from just some mean moms who just decided to say that. It was actually from a study that they did when they compared the two of breastfeeding or formula feeding. So let's understand why. Why is it best? So not only does it provide all of the necessary nutrients, but it also can help prevent things like allergy, help enhance cognitive development, prevent obesity, and the list goes on and on. So this is up. I will attach this into the bottom blurb of this podcast if you want to check it out for yourself. Again, you can read the full text, but I think that you do have to, actually, this one looks like you don't have to pay for it. Oh, great. So the full text is there for you if you're interested in reading it. It's a, what is this, 10-page long study that they did. And they've come to this conclusion that breastfeeding is the optimal method of infant feeding. So that is not just mom saying that. That is not a hateful thing to say. This is just understanding they came to this conclusion when comparing the two things. So let's talk about, what does that mean? What do you mean it is the optimal? It is the best. Let's take the example of having whole foods, natural foods, foods that grow in the ground or on trees that is God-given to this earth. Of course, that would be your first choice for what is best for nutrients, protecting yourself from illnesses, getting full with actually having nutrients and things that are of substance. So that I would compare whole foods like fruits and vegetables and such to breastfeeding. And then you have the other side, which is processed food. There are great processed foods out there. You can look at ingredients and be like, well, this is from natural ingredients, but it is processed. So understanding that formula is a processed milk. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Breastfeeding is to whole foods, natural foods, as formula is to processed foods. Okay, just understanding that is where we're at with that. But let's talk about why the argument of fed is best starts coming into play. What if, for some reason, you could not get your hands on that good whole foods, natural foods? What if there's a supply chain issue and you can't get to it? Or there's an expense and you're like, I'm struggling to pay for this food. Or you're a working mom or dad and you're like, I don't have time to make the food after work with Whole Foods. It does take a little bit longer than processed food. So those are reasons why you might get something more convenient like processed foods. So let's talk about that in a sense of breastfeeding. So what if you can't or are unable to or choose not to breastfeed? Does that mean not feeding your baby is the option? Absolutely not. Feed your baby. There is no shame of how you feed your baby. Please just feed your baby. But understanding that people do sometimes struggle with breastfeeding, whether it's for a supply issue, there's a lack of education and understanding what it really takes sometimes to breastfeed. There's a societal view sometimes that, oh, breastfeeding or you're crunchy or that's too natural minded. And you may not have anybody around you who has breastfed. And so for you, you're like, why would I go that route? That's not really me. Let's go this way. You might have a lack of support from people. It does take, it is a full-time job sometimes, especially in the beginning, to breastfeed. So you might not have that help and that support that you need from people. It might be a mental health thing. It might be you're going through postpartum depression or anxiety, or you're feeling touched out and you're just not comfortable breastfeeding right now. Understandable. There might be a past trauma. If you're a victim of sexual abuse or anything that just triggers you for some reason when a child is nursing or close with you in that sort of way, that could be affecting your desire to breastfeed or your ability to breastfeed. So understanding all of those reasons are understood. That still does not mean that breastfeeding is not the optimal first choice. But if you're not able to, for whatever those reasons are, that's okay. Feed your baby. No shame there. So, and I thought that was important to just get out there because people get really sensitive about it, and it's understandable. If you're attacking somebody without knowing why they don't have access to this amazing thing, or why they choose to not have access to this amazing thing, and you're just attacking them, people feel defensive and they feel that they need to come out and say, fed is best. My baby is being fed. Are you going to tell me not to feed my baby? And that's not the argument at all. The argument needs to be simply breastfeeding is the most optimal way of feeding your child because of all the benefits, such as the nutrients. It supports your immune system, the natural antibodies that come from that. One thing that's really interesting and kind of, I think, not talked about enough is if you are sick and you are breastfeeding, it is not helpful or needed to separate yourself from your baby. Instead, you're going to want to stay with them and nurse them through that because they're going to get the antibodies for whatever it is that your body is fighting, and they're going to get that kind of free of the illness a lot of times. So free antibodies helps your immune support, helps brain development, all of that. And then in addition, it is a free food that you get to feed your baby for a whole year, if not longer, or 6 months, wherever some people feel comfortable stopping. And it's always ready. That was one of my favorite things whenever we were in the early days and I was getting ready to go somewhere and my mind's everywhere. Like, I need this for the baby. I need this for the baby. I need that. And I'd be like, food. Okay, got it. Like, we're good to go. Now she is eating more than just breastfeeding. And so I'm like, I got to grab an orange, got to grab a snack bar, whatever it may be. Like, it is a bit more work. And I can only imagine as a parent who has to use formula or chooses to use formula, that is something that you have to prepare. You have to get it ready. You have to make sure that you have it when you go places. So that is a kind of perk of breastfeeding, is that it is always ready. It is free. Whenever your baby is tired or you're tired in the middle of the night and your baby's hungry, you don't have to get up and get a bottle ready. You can just pop them on and there you go. You're nursing and they're full and you're able to still kind of stay in a relaxed state. So that's a great benefit of breastfeeding as well. Another thing that has been brought up lately, I don't know if anybody's paid attention to this or heard about this on the news. I think people have even been sharing it on social media and stuff, is there's been a lot of formula recalls lately, which is so scary. Babies have been dying. People are in big trouble, obviously, but it's become a whole terrifying thing. Shelves were kind of bare for parents trying to get formula. And that's scary. I mean, they kind of are in control of if you're able to feed your baby or not. Now, if you go to the store and suddenly the formula that your baby is comfortable with and you're used to giving is not available, or you have had to be afraid of, can this formula now harm my baby? That's just a whole other scary thing to this side of it right now. So it's nice with breastfeeding, you don't have to worry about that. In addition to all those great benefits, I think the best benefit is the bonding that you get from breastfeeding. So obviously anyone can bond with their baby, but there is an actual chemical makeup going on that happens whenever you do breastfeed. And that is because of the hormone being released, oxytocin. So oxytocin is known as the love hormone. This is a hormone that's released into your body whenever you are having sex, whenever you are in childbirth, and whenever you are breastfeeding. And this is just the most happy feeling that you can feel. And it's just amazing to know that this hormone can actually help women who are in that postpartum stage to not have depression and anxiety. So that's really amazing. Doctors actually prescribe oxytocin to try to help with things, but your body is naturally making it while breastfeeding. So I thought that was really, really cool. It also helps, they say, with mothers being able to be in the right mindset and being able to really hear their intuition during those times of early motherhood. So I think that is just so great. And it's the coolest thing that we really are made for each other. Like, we are making the milk that is going to be providing our child with a lifeline for the next year or so. And then they, in turn, are providing us with a chemical that is naturally provided for our well-being and our mental sake, and just creating that bond. It's very clear we were made for each other and God designed it that way. So I think that's one of the coolest things. So now I want to jump into things that you might expect when breastfeeding. So there are, like I was saying, the obvious great things of breastfeeding that can happen, but I think it's important to understand some of the physical aspects, some of the possible struggles that there might be. So let's talk about that. So pretty simple breakdown of what you're going to expect whenever you're first breastfeeding is those first couple days of breastfeeding, you are actually releasing what's called colostrum. You may have heard of this before, you may be fully aware of it, but I just wanted to give a little bit of understanding on what that is. So colostrum is a very rich, it's not even a fully milk yet, but it's very rich in the beginning, and it is full of antibodies. It is like your baby's super food. That is everything that they're going to need in those first few days. So colostrum is being released in the beginning. And during that time, and when I say the beginning, it's like the first 3 to 4 days. During that time, your body is trying to figure out how much milk to make. How many babies am I feeding? How much is this baby eating? So your body is trying to regulate and understand how much milk is about to be needed on a regular demand and supply. So around day 3 or 4, and of course this can be different depending on so many different aspects, but on around day 3 or 4, your milk comes in, and this is when it's kind of like the floodgates can release. You're into a regular routine. Sometimes you start having leaking around a certain time every day. You start lactating if you're just in a hot shower, or if a baby cries, or things like that. So that is your milk actually coming in. And it takes a couple of days, or at least it did for me and women that I've talked to, for you to feel the difference between when your milk comes in and when you're still in that regulating, trying to figure it out stage. And when your milk does come in, you start to feel the letdown happen. And that's kind of like, it's odd at first, but then you get used to it. It's a tingly, burning feeling, and not a bad burn. It's just a like, oh, something's happening, what's happening? And then all of a sudden you'll have your milk let down and know that, okay, that is what was going on. I need to get baby to boob, or I need to pump to get this milk out of me. So that's going to happen in the beginning days. And I think it's important to understand too, those first 3 or 4 days, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes as breastfeeding moms, or moms just trying to figure out how to survive it with a newborn, but understanding that this is brand new for you and your body is doing it sometimes for the first time, and your baby is brand new and they're trying to figure out how to do this. And while it does come naturally, it may be a struggle for so many different reasons. And so kind of giving yourself that 3-4 days grace of like, okay, I know that this is going to be different as soon as my milk comes in, and we might get it down in a week or so. But in those beginning days, there's learning curves and there's a lot of struggles that you might encounter. So don't give up if you're in those first few days and you're like, yeah, I tried, it just wasn't for me. Understand that that is totally normal and natural to go through those beginning days of transition. So another thing that might happen within those first couple of weeks, and I actually experienced it for months, is cluster feeding. This is something when you feel like you're on a constant need of nursing. Your baby is most likely going through some type of developmental growth, a growth spurt. They are just needing more and more and more food for this time. And this might happen with bottle fed babies too. They do not have to just nurse every 3 hours because that's what the schedule said. Instead, it's let's figure out what are they needing right now. And a lot of times that looks like cluster feeding in those early times. So I know I experienced it and I reached out to friends, and I've had friends experience it who reached out to me and they're like, she's just constantly nursing. What is going on? That again is a normal process for breastfeeding. It happens. And what worked for us is just accepting that this is just a small time that she's going to need to be attached more frequently, maybe 30 minutes to every hour rather than every 2 to 3 hours, and just going with it and giving her what she needs. And then you see them come on the other side of that growth and be like, oh, wow, you have changed in the last couple of days. And that's because my body supplied that growth for you with all the amazing nutrients that I was able to provide for you. So that can happen, cluster feeding. Another thing you can possibly expect is understanding that babies are not always just nursing for food. Sometimes, a lot of times, babies nurse for comfort too. You see babies sometimes use pacifiers. There is a suck reflex that they are needing to have that suction of something going on. That is so natural. And so if you are not yet using pacifiers, or even if you're using pacifiers, but they know the difference between the plastic and the real thing, they might want to just nurse on you for comfort often. And that again is something temporary. It will pass, but just knowing that, oh my gosh, they want to nurse again, or I don't have milk coming out right now. Why are they wanting this? A lot of times it could just be for a comfort of having something to meet that suck reflex. So understanding that, because that is something that the baby is needing to meet, that suck reflex. And a lot of times as breastfeeding moms, people can feel very just like they're being used as a pacifier. And that saying is actually kind of funny because we are not being used as a pacifier. We were the ones who were here before the pacifier. The pacifier was actually made to supplement the breast, the nipple for that child's needs. And so when we do go through those stages of cluster feeding or just feeling like the baby is just wanting to suck all the time, it is hard. Trust me, I understand it is hard, but our body was intended for that. A pacifier was created to supplement that and maybe sometimes give us a break if needed. But I think that's something that is important to talk about too. Often hospitals or pediatricians kind of push the pacifier or a bottle very soon. And then mothers wonder why they're having trouble latching and why their child is not breastfeeding or their supply didn't come in. And oftentimes it's like, oh, it's me, it's my body. But I think it's important to realize that pacifiers, anything with a plastic nipple, if given too soon before your breastfeeding is established well with your child, it can affect that. And it can lessen your supply because your baby is not nursing on you as often as they're needing to. Instead, they're using a plastic nipple. And it can also help or hurt their latch. If your child has a shallow latch on you and it's painful and it's not working out well for them, but then they're having a bottle or a pacifier that's much easier to suck on and get milk free flowing in, they're going to prefer that a lot of times. And so that sometimes is pushed onto moms, that pacifier bottle or even a nipple shield. That's a whole other spiel, which can be helpful for people. But again, if your supply and your latch is not established yet, these things can hurt your breastfeeding journey if you introduce it too soon. So we were recommended to wait until breastfeeding was established. My lactation consultant, pediatrician, and our chiropractor that we were going to see for other reasons that I'll jump into for the next segment here. They all recommended to wait until 4-week point. And it felt like a long 4 weeks, I'll tell you, because my baby was cluster feeding. She had a really shallow latch and it was painful. But I endured it because I knew that if I wanted to get that breastfeeding down, I needed to solely have a real nipple being what she's using. So that's just something I think is really important to talk about. The last possibility of what to expect is that breastfeeding doesn't always come easy. So I've heard from maybe a handful of moms, probably less than that were like, oh, really? Breastfeeding was so easy for me. It just put you on there and it just worked. But majority of moms that I've talked to said quite the opposite. They actually said it didn't come easy. While it is the most natural thing, there is a huge learning curve. And there can also be environmental factors or just things going on with you or baby that are affecting breastfeeding. So let's talk about those. I want to jump into reasons why breastfeeding may not come easy. So first reason I feel is important is because we went through this and I had no idea. There might be a latching issue. So baby is having a hard time getting a deep latch. So getting on their entire mouth over the entire nipple is crucial. If you have a shallow latch and you just have baby hanging on to the nipple, not only is that horribly painful for you, but it's not helping the baby get all the milk that they need. So I'm going to show you with this handy dandy balloon and my baby's baby doll of how to get a deep latch. Again, if you are just listening, I will try to narrate to make this understandable. So a huge thing when it comes to a shallow latch is understanding if they are on a shallow latch, just on the nipple part, it's important to unlatch and get them on there again. And this may take a couple of times in the beginning. So a shallow latch is just on the nipple and you just feel a tugging. You look down, you see your areola is still not covered by the baby's mouth. You need to try again. And in order to unlatch, you can stick a finger into the baby's cheek and you kind of just pull to the side and they naturally should unlatch. So doing that. And then whenever you are nursing, you're holding the baby, it is important to bring the baby to the breast and not bring the breast to the baby. This is just a great visual. This is going to have to be anybody who's not listening or not watching the YouTube right now, you're going to have to jump on and see, or I might just post a picture of my goofy self with this fake baby and balloon right here. So when you are holding your baby, first of all, it's understandable that a newborn is a little more fragile and you don't really know how to hold them properly and what's going on and different things, but it's important to start good habits early on with breastfeeding rather than doing it in an incorrect way and then suffering through it. You don't want you or baby to suffer through it. So another thing that can happen with the shallow latch is babies can get a lot of gas because they're getting a lot of air pumped through, which then causes tummy troubles and lots of crying. And people say, oh, I think they have colic. I don't know what's going on. Do you have a shallow latch? Let's talk about that. Are they getting gas happening? Okay, so another rant for another time. So deep latch, you want to bring the baby to the, I actually need to switch hands for this. So you want to hold them where you have control of baby's neck. And something that the lactation consultant told me, and I was like, that makes sense. So a lot of times we want to put our whole hand under the baby's head and kind of pull baby to it. And the lactation consultant said, do you like when people grab you by the back of the head? And I was like, no, I don't. So she said, instead, cup the baby's neck and then just have one finger for support, or maybe two fingers or whatever you feel comfortable with, but you're more so controlling the baby's head and giving them that head support with your hand on their neck. So when you're holding the baby, you're going to bring them to the breast, and then you want to wait until they open their mouth all the way. A way to do that is having your breast or your nipple rubbing by their nose area. This will give them the scent, and they will be able to open up and say, oh, there it is, I want that. So you want to wait. You kind of want to show the baby the nipple on the nose, and then have them open up. Once they open up wide, you are going to pop them on there. And when the lactation consultant showed me, and I've had other people show me how they do it, it felt a little aggressive in the beginning. I was like, oh, my baby's head. But she's like, you want to get them on there as fast as possible before they start closing up their mouth, and then you get a shallow latch. So again, rubbing the nipple on the nose, getting them to open wide. Once they open, you pull the baby to the breast. I'm not leaning over and giving the baby the breast by bringing it to them. So that's huge. Okay. Another thing that's important while you're doing this is understanding, look at how I am holding the breast. This is something I learned too, is you want to grab the breast like a hamburger. You're trying to get it moved forward, and you're going to squeeze as you bring baby up to it. So holding it like a hamburger, not just like cupping it or just laying there and hoping that it'll reach the baby. You want to actually squeeze it, get it in optimal positioning, and then bringing the baby up. Okay. So that is all about like how to handle your breast while breastfeeding. Quick thing I want to show while I have my handy dandy baby doll out is different holds and how to handle the baby while you're breastfeeding. So I showed you the holding the neck cross cradle. So across from your body is one way that you can hold your baby. Another style is football style. This one I struggled with a bit, and I'll pull this down to be able to show it, but I hear it works great, and it really helps get a good latch for some mothers. So this one, you're going to have baby with the same grip on their head and neck, but you're going to have them on the side of the body that your arm is on that's holding them, and you're going to hold them like a football. It's not going to be down low. Obviously, you're going to hold them in line with your breast, and then you're simply bringing their head to your breast as you feed them. So this is the football hold. And then another really great breastfeeding position that might take a little bit of time, at least it did for us, is sideline. This has been game changer though. Sideline happens when you are lying down on the bed or on a couch or wherever it may be, and your baby is lying down with you. You can have your baby in the crook of your arm, and as you're lying down, you're able to just have baby nursing on you, and y'all are both lying parallel to each other. So that was really helpful as she got a little bit bigger. For us, that's something that worked really well, and something I continue to do with her. It makes it easy to be able to, I was recovering from a cesarean, and so I had a hard time having to just like jump up and get her out of the bassinet every time she needed a nurse. Instead, I was able to bring her into bed safely with us and have her in the crook of my arm so I could tell if she was moving anywhere, and I just had her right there. And during that first time, if you are sidelined, if you are nursing it while co-sleeping, I would definitely recommend having a towel under you or burp cloths galore. I had burp cloths all over my house, and I would constantly just be like grabbing burp cloths to make sure that I wasn't leaking all over the bed or waking up in a puddle of breast milk. So that was really helpful too. Okay, so in addition to the holds and making sure that you're doing it the right way, the latching, all of that, I'm going to try to go into a quick spiel of other concerns that I have heard from mothers, as well as what we have experienced when it comes to breastfeeding not always coming easily. So in addition to the latching issue that my child had, she had tongue tie and a lip tie, which I hear is very common, but it can greatly affect their latch because they're not able to stick their tongue out. They're not able to open their mouth fully and get over the nipple the way they need to. So the ties was something that I had to go see a pediatric dentist for, and we had to get them clipped. In addition to that stuff, my baby had some cranial work and tightness in her jaw from a traumatic birth. She was stuck in the canal for a long time during birth. And so during that time, her cranium got kind of pushed into a cone shape. And it was just something that we decided to go see a pediatric chiropractor, which sounds a little out there, but it was the most amazing experience. Just being able to help her work through that tightness. We definitely saw a difference in her body being able to move around freely, and her latching got so much better after that. So that might be something that you need to look into as well, if that's, a possibility. So another big issue that I think women struggle with, and this one is just totally heartbreaking to me because I know it's nothing that is in your control a lot of times, and people feel very down on themselves when they shouldn't. And that is a lack of supply. This is something that sometimes it just happens. It's totally out of your control. There are things that could be going on prior to pregnancy and birth that your body just wasn't able to produce what it needed to. But there are possible things that you can at least try from friends that I knew with supply concerns that they tried and did in order to get their supply back up. So some of this may be already heard of and you may have tried and it may not work for you, but I just want to put it out there if anybody is not educated on this and doesn't know. So there's tons of supplements out there that can actually help with your supply, but I'm going to share this one real quick, just a screenshot of this one, because this was something, this brand actually has a bunch of different lactation supplements that are, I think, great. One of them I used helped with anytime I got clogged ducts. That was something that I turned to. But this one is liquid gold, and it is to help breast milk, and it helps increase your supply. So this is something that I know a lot of moms use, and the brand is Legendary Milk. So like I said, they have a couple of different ones that you can check out if you're interested in that. In addition to supplements, you can do teas, they have cookies, and people can make brownies out of it. And there's so many different options when it comes to ingesting things to help your supply. In addition, your diet, things that you're taking in need to be like high fatty foods and helping your supply be rich in hydration. I've talked about this in my first episode, and I will continue to talk about it. Hydration is so important. And it's one of those things that it's so silly. We're like, oh, I just haven't drank water today. I don't know how, but always have a glass of water or a bottle or something around and drink your water, guys. Okay, speaking of, let me drink that. Okay, you got to think about it. Majority of the milk is made of water and liquid content. So you're going to need to be fueling your body with that almost double the amount, so that you're not only getting the hydration you need, but then your body is able to create the liquid to feed your baby too. So that's a big, easy, and obvious one. And the last one is pumping. This is something a friend of mine did for 5 months. She just pumped, like hardcore pumped, and to get her supply up. She did exclusive pumping afterwards because her son was having some latching concerns. And so pumping helped actually get her just enough at the time for 5 months to be able to feed her baby. And so while it's not an easy task, because breastfeeding is a full-time job and then pumping all the time is a full-time job, it is something that can help get your supply up. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check that out too. But there is a kind of like fine line that I've heard of regarding pumping too soon. It is, you do, like I was talking about earlier, getting through those first, week or so where your body is trying to regulate and figure out how much to make. If you pump too soon, your body can make too much, and then you have an oversupply, which sounds great, but it does become a pain down the road because your breasts fill very quickly. And then you're unable to release that sometimes because the baby's not able to keep up with it. And so you can get engorged and you can get mastitis, and that can be very painful. In addition to the oversupply being painful or hard for you, it also is hard when you have an oversupply because it can like seem like it's drowning your baby. This is something we struggled with a little bit. I didn't pump or anything, but I did have an oversupply, and it kind of regulated and worked itself out. But my baby was constantly gagging while she was trying to drink the milk. And it also had to do with her tongue tie. She was unable to drink and gulp down as fast as my breast was producing. So that can just be a concern. If you're pumping too soon, you can cause an oversupply for yourself. But, pick the lesser of two evils. Sometimes I know people with lack of supply say, I'd rather have an oversupply than a lack of supply. So that's understandable, but just putting that out there to be a little aware of it, that if you do it too soon, it can cause an oversupply. Okay, so when it comes to what is normal with breastfeeding and how your nipples and breasts are feeling for the first time, I think it's important to know the main part is it is going to be uncomfortable, but if it is completely painful, you have cracked, sore, or bleeding nipples, that is not normal. That's not something that should be happening. If that's happening, you're going to need to seek attention and get some nipple cream on that. Try to, take breaks if you can in between, and pump if you're not nursing, or vice versa. But if your nipples are just a little tender and I remember mine on like day 4, I was just crying to my husband and my pediatrician and like, I can't nurse anymore. Like I can't handle it. My nipples cannot handle this. What is going on? I'll just pump. Like, we'll just exclusively pump. This will be fine. Can I feed her with a syringe? Like, what do I do to not have her latch on to me again and be in pain? And I didn't have cracked or sore nipples, and I was uncomfortable, but she also had a shallow latch. So it was clear that something was wrong at that time. And being able to share that with, the support that I had, they were able to say, something's a little worse or off than it should be. So let's seek some attention for that. So that's my spiel on things that you might come across if breastfeeding is not coming easy to you. I do hope that breastfeeding comes easy to you and all women listening to this, but I just wanted to share that it sometimes doesn't. And persevering through those challenges, knowing that you're not alone, and seeking the help that you need if you feel breastfeeding is what you want to continue to pursue. Reaching out to a lactation consultant, finding a pediatrician that supports your decision to breastfeed. If breastfeeding is important to you, don't let them brush you off and tell you, oh, it's fine, your baby needs to eat, let's just get them some formula. There's always options, and sometimes you need to just stand your ground and be able to reach out to the people who will support you in those decisions. So I really hope that that is possible for you. All right, well, that wraps up this week's episode of Learning as They Grow. I'm Alicia Foster. If you have any questions regarding breastfeeding, motherhood, and need some support in any way, shape, or form, I'd be happy to be here for you. I would love to answer any questions regarding breastfeeding. There is so much more that I would have loved to dive into, but my little one's up, so we are done for the day. I hope y'all have an excellent day, and I'll see you next week.